Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video we're going to talk about how do you find a new attorney? How do I go about finding a new attorney? This is, a fairly commonly asked question by my clients. I think people often are frustrated with their attorneys. I'm not a huge advocate for just switching attorneys. That can be problematic, and I'm going to talk about that. But if you decide it is the right move, and you do need to do that, how do you go about selecting one that doesn't get you back in the same position that you're in now? Before we dive into this, let me just remind you, as always, if you like my content, don't forget to hit like on the video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And as always, please feel free to share this on social media. If you feel really frustrated with your attorney, I would encourage you to maybe discuss it with other people, friends, family, see if anybody has recommendations, maybe interview other attorneys before you just pull the trigger and fire them. When we're in front of the judge and you've had multiple attorneys in your case, I think that can start to reflect poorly on you. And I don't think it's as much of an issue of if you go through an initial case and you get a judgment, like you go through an initial divorce or paternity action or whatever it is, and you get a judgment. And then 2 or 3 years later, you guys are in court and you have a different attorney. And then 3 years after that, you're in court and you have a third attorney. That's not as big a deal. Like the attorney changing in between the court processes with gaps in between is not that big a deal. That's pretty common. Some people do still go back to their original attorney, but I would say it's not uncommon for people to find a new one. But when we're in an ongoing kind of litigation situation and we're shifting attorneys, the court can start to go, why does this person not get along with every single attorney they have? So I always say, if you're going to switch once, just please make it a good one so that you don't have to do it again. If you've had 2 attorneys, I don't think the court is necessarily going to super frown on that. But I think when we start getting into like 3, 4, it gets a little more problematic. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't change if you're that far in on attorneys. I'm just saying try to avoid that if at all possible. If you've been through 4 and you weren't happy with any of them, maybe you need to try to give the attorney the benefit of the doubt, okay? But if you do decide that, we're just not on the same page, I'm not getting communicated with, I think that's one of my clients' biggest complaints across the board is communication issues. They don't hear back from their attorney for 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is. I have people that get no communication. And I think that's the thing that feels most frustrating for clients. But sometimes you're also just not on the same page, and it can almost be like oil and water. And so you're already fighting with your ex. Now you're having to fight with your attorney also, and you're just exhausted. You got nothing left to do that, right? So when you get to the point where you're like, okay, look, I need to change attorneys, okay? How do we go about this process? Again, don't just pull the trigger and fire your attorney. That's not what I would do. What I would start with is, okay, let's find 3 other attorneys to interview, okay? And I would encourage you to interview. Make sure you have a mixture of male, female, different ages, okay? And look at your judge. Is your judge an older male? Well, maybe an older male attorney will do better in front of that judge. Is your judge a younger female? Maybe a younger female will do better in front of that judge. We tend to like people that are like us subconsciously. That's just a human nature thing. I'm not saying your judge is consciously doing that. But as a human being, we tend to like people that we view as being like us. And so that can kind of sometimes give you a little bit of an in, kind of. But I do find that in my experience, in general, again, this is not like across the board, so it doesn't apply in 100% of cases. But in general, I find male attorneys tend to be less emotional, most of the time. I think that's true of men in general, right? And it's no different in attorney world than any other world. Men tend to be less emotional than women do. I think that's something we need a lot of times in the child custody arena because it is so highly emotional. And I also think, there's something to be said for having a little bit of experience. I personally would prefer my attorney be in their 50s to 60s. I don't generally want them like 70s. I feel like they start kind of pushing a point where maybe like it's not such a good idea, cognitively at that point, maybe because they're just not as fast. It doesn't come as quickly, as easily, and all that kind of thing. Again, not true in 100% of cases. But, I also think that if you get an attorney that's like in their 30s or so, not that they're not competent, not that they're not good at what they do and all those things, but a lot of times they're kind of more career driven. They have a point to prove. They want to make a name for themselves, whatever it is that sort of drives them. And that can kind of become a lot of times a higher priority than helping you in your family situation. I personally also like to know if they've been through it before. I think this makes a huge difference. I know with my late husband's practice, we got into that because we both had been through the custody situation and all of that. And many of our colleagues actually have not. I'm actually kind of surprised sometimes at the volume of people that haven't been through it, because I think to myself, why in the world would you work in this arena if you hadn't actually been through it and feel like, wow, I've learned something that might actually be useful to other people, right? That's how I came into all this. And so if you didn't have that, I'm not really sure what would drive you to work in this particular area, but I think that your attorney is going to be a lot more empathetic, a lot more understanding of the conflict, especially if you're dealing with a narcissist or high conflict person on the other side. And I would want to ask questions around that at the interview, like, hey, have you dealt with, usually high conflict is the term that we use in the legal world. We don't usually say narcissist. High conflict encompasses a lot of different things, not just narcissism. It can be borderline. People can have bipolar, just all kinds of different things where they're just high conflict. So that's kind of the general term we give it in the legal field. So I would want to ask them, like, how many high conflict cases have you done? Have you had a lot of success with that? Do you understand the difficulty in dealing with a high conflict person on the other side and communicating with them, having boundaries, all those different things? When I have people do this, like I said, I will have them pick like 3 people. I generally try to stick with people that only practice family law. Now, again, this isn't an across the board thing because some of you are in very small rural areas where you don't have the luxury of having attorneys that only practice one area of law. But if you're in a bigger metropolitan area, like I'm in San Diego, so yeah, if you're in San Diego, you want somebody that practices only family law. Or if you're in LA or Orange County or San Francisco or Chicago or Miami or big metropolitan areas, you want to find somebody that is specializing in family law because they're going to be more familiar with those judges. They're going to be more familiar with the family code for your state. That's going to be their only area that they're focused on. They're going to kind of know it inside out, know what works, what doesn't. So if you are in a bigger area, focus on a family law person. If you're in a smaller area, you may have to go with somebody that does, a few different things. The one thing that I find that doesn't really go real well with family is usually criminal and business, because criminal and business tend to be so aggressive. And I think that approach is really a detriment a lot of times in a family law case because we're dealing with people and relationships, and that sort of aggressiveness just isn't really setting the family up for success long term. I had somebody recently come on one of my social media things and say, where do I find the most aggressive attorney, in this particular city and state? And I said, you're looking for the wrong thing. You don't want somebody that's just aggressive, just to be aggressive. Like, that's not helpful. You want somebody that's experienced. You want somebody that knows when they need to be aggressive, when they don't, what the pros and cons of that are in every situation. You don't want to get somebody that's just nasty to be nasty. And I've seen a lot of attorneys be that way. And again, I think it gets very expensive and it can be detrimental to your case. And attorneys know judges know when attorneys have reputations for just being just difficult and aggressive for just no apparent reason. So you want to ask about their approach to the case. Are they settlement oriented? How much litigation experience have they had? How many trials have they done? They don't usually do a ton of trials per year. I would say 8 to 10 is kind of the norm. If you have somebody that's got a bigger firm and more litigation, they might be closer to, 20, 30, something like that. But even if your person said 5 or 6, I don't think that's that unusual. I think 5 or 6 trials is kind of a normal. And then the other ones that you're settling. So you're going to trial on some, you're settling some. You kind of have that combination. But one of the things that you can look for is most states, if you go to your state bar website, the attorney bar, like ours is the State Bar of California. But if you go to your state bar website, you can look at, does your state offer sort of specializations for attorneys to specialize in specific areas of law? So like in California, we have a designated family law specialization that tells you that this attorney's had at least X amount of experience. They've done at least X amount of trials. They have to sit for an exam. So they have a certain amount of legal knowledge. Now, I'm not saying that exam, that specialization alone means they're qualified, or that somebody that doesn't have it isn't qualified. I will tell you that my late husband, never got that, just because he didn't love litigation. We didn't feel the need to feed into that. We did a lot of mediation in our practice and whatnot. And so it just wasn't something that he ever felt the need to go and do. He had a thriving practice. He had plenty of work, and he just didn't ever feel the need to go have some label put on it for him. But it does give you the ability to kind of discern and know, okay, this person at least has a certain minimum level of experience, right? The other designation that I think can be helpful sometimes, if you are in like a really difficult situation and you're like, I need an attorney that's going to like dig in and do this and push it and go. And I don't really, the money, I'm not asking to spend money on the case, but I'm also willing to spend money if I need to get this accomplished. One of the designations that I think is helpful is there's a designation called AAML, which is American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, I believe. I don't have any connection to this designation. I don't know anybody there. I don't get any kind of anything from any of it. I just know that this is kind of a more exclusive designation. Lawyers that get certified by them, they have to go through like multi-panel interviews. They have to have judges that endorse them, colleagues that endorse them, clients that endorse them. Like, it's a really rigorous process to get that particular designation. Generally, those people are going to cost more. You kind of get what you pay for. But I think that you can, if you've been through some really bad experiences, it might be worth it to you to go, okay, I'm just going to go for the gold and look for this particular designation and find somebody that I just know off the bat is capable of handling this. Okay. And when you go in for the interview, you need to understand that this isn't just about, are they willing to take your case? This is also about, do you want them to take your case? When I get on a phone with a potential new client, it's like, am I assessing, am I willing to take you on as a coaching client? Yes. I'm trying to assess that. And a lot of times I'm not willing to take that person on. I don't take on every person I talk to, but I also expect that person to ask me questions and get enough information that they need to where they can determine, hey, do they think I can help them in their case? Do they want to work with me? Do they think I'm the person to help them? So you have to look at that attorney interview as a two-way street, not just, is that attorney willing to take your case, but do you even want that attorney to be the person representing you in court? And I would ask questions about, do they have other staff? If they're a solo and you're in a small area, well, communication might be more limited because when they're in court, they can't answer you. Do they have a paralegal or other staff who does that? If they have paralegal or other staff that also helps with paperwork and things, sometimes that'll also reduce your rate, right? Those people are a lower hourly billable rate than the attorney is. So it can help with costs and things. What's their typical retainer? Understand that a retainer is just what they bill against on an hourly basis. Whether somebody asks you for a $3,000 retainer, or $5,000 retainer, or $10,000 retainer, isn't really as big a deal, because what they're doing is they're billing against it at an hourly rate as they do the work. So if somebody lowballs you at $3,000, well, and then they run out of money, guess what they're going to say? I need another $3,000, or I need another $5,000, or whatever. And they're just going to be coming back asking for money sooner. Now, a lot of times bigger retainers do mean bigger hourly rates. So those usually do correlate. But again, it's a question that you need to ask. You need to ask about communication. Can I text? Do you prefer phone calls? Do you email? How often do you respond? How long, what's the time frame? Is it, same business day, 24 hours, 48 hours a week? What is a normal expectation? If you're the kind of client that wants regular check-ins, maybe you just schedule regular weekly recurring calls for 15 minutes with your attorney so you could touch base. That's how you want to spend your money. So ask all these kinds of questions so that after the fact, you're not unhappy with the situation. Now, does this mean everything's going to be perfect and go exactly the way you want it to? No. Things happen. People are human. They get busy. Sometimes they don't get to respond. They're sick. They're out. Whatever happens. But at least this puts you on a path to figuring out, is this a compatible working relationship? Does this person tend to be only available 8 to 5? Can I text them later? Are they an evening person? Are they a morning person? Do they tend to come and work a little later and stay later? Do they tend to come early and leave early? Are there ever any weekends? All this kind of stuff of like, who do you call in a crisis? This is a lot of what my coaching clients deal with is like, I'm the person they call at 7 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, because guess what? Attorney's not available to tell me how to handle this conflict I'm having with the other parent right now, right here. And we're about to have the police called if somebody doesn't help me figure out how to handle it, right? So you need to know what your access to that person is. And you don't want to use them as your therapist or anything like that. They're there to do the legal prosecution part of your case. I hope that helps you in sorting out how to find a new attorney if you're in a situation that you need to do that. If you'd like more help figuring out if that's something that you want to do, or even figuring out how to find the new person, if you do know that's what you want to do, then you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There is a link on that page where you can learn more about my group coaching programs for dads and moms. You can also learn about my one-on-one VIP coaching services, and I'll see you guys next time. Turn us to thousands.